Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Convery, where we delve into the diverse journeys of professionals across various industries. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Stina Borth, founder and CEO of Keymaker Services, an organization dedicated to elevating workforce productivity and youth development. Stina is an award-winning educator, neurodiversity specialist, and a passionate advocate for inclusion in high-performing environments. With a master's in education and a wealth of experience, Stina brings a unique blend of sharp insight and empathy to her work, specializing in executive functioning skills and empowering individuals to thrive. In our conversation today, we'll explore Stina's entrepreneurial journey, her passion for neurodiversity and inclusivity, and of course, her insights into unlocking human potential in the workplace and beyond. Stina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited for you to be here. So, why don't we start with a few bit of a rapid fire question so our audience gets to know you better? What do you consider your superpower?
Well, in addition to being a badass fisherwoman, I would say it's not what anybody would pull out, but I have this ability to go into a room or a group of people and really read through observation. And it really it's something I must have
Mm,
picked it up through my developmental years and then really realized how valuable it is both within the workplace and, personal relationships to be able to adjust how I deliver and how I receive so that communication that I am putting out there, the other party, the other folks around can receive it and connect. And my brain tends to pick up on the verbal and nonverbal really well.
yep.
And for work, that's more of like, it's a superpower because it allows me to massage teams and folks and guide them into working together, finding a thread when they might have opposing views. And and really that also feeds into identifying like alternative ways of communication, but reframing thoughts. A lot of
Yep.
times we have similar thoughts and it comes out in different ways. We don't realize how much we really have in common. And that leads
Exactly.
to strengths and going, well, I have this and you have that, and that goes really well together. So
It's a great superpower.
it really, and it served me so well across all relationships.
It's
That
amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, it's a great to have those insights and to be able to execute those in a way that's inclusive and bringing people in. So another question I always like to ask my guests is, what was your favorite subject in school?
so it changed depending on the period of schooling. I would
Yeah.
say high school was absolutely, took it was 2 years in a row. The IB English.
Okay.
Um, and then also like a total, this is so going to be entrepreneurial. I designed an independent study for myself and like second language acquisition and within education. And I went and I found a teacher on campus that would I would report to, but I basically designed my own curriculum, which is hilarious because
What?
that's a lot of what I do now.
Yeah.
Went through it. And I think in college, it probably was like behavioral practices or human relations.
Okay.
Again, not surprising. But I loved my master's research work because
Nice.
again, I got to design it. It was about a topic, uh, mental health maintenance best practices based on various professionals, practitioners and taking their varying perspectives, whether they were in research at a university or they were working in the workforce or in the education system, and really honing in on. And I didn't find what I wanted to. When you identify your topic, you're look, I want to prove this hypothesis. What I found was there's a high need for this type of education and training for and I'm really mental health maintenance. What I didn't have at the time was the term neurodiversity or cognitive ability or
Sure.
executive functioning skills. So
Okay.
that kind of spearheaded a lot of the work after that. So
Interesting. Interesting. And first job, like we all start somewhere. I'm sure I was just reflecting on that this morning when I was doing some work. But what was your very first job?
I never had just one first,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, well, Well, I at 12, I designed a babysitting business.
Okay.
Um, Already entrepreneur. I didn't know what any of that was. I just knew that there was this need and I wanted to meet it, and that there had to be a formula to do that. So I, created flyers and business cards, and
Oh my
my goal
gosh, that's a big, yeah. Okay.
was to pay for a phone line because I knew you had to have, some way to communicate and maintain that communication. But then along, like almost parallel along with that, I was a caddy
Okay.
at a golf course. One of, I think I was maybe one of the only female presenting
Yeah.
caddies.
Yeah.
Um, and I was an infant swim instructor, barista,
Yeah.
server, busser, waiter, receptionist, all of that within those formative years. Yeah.
Which is great because you get so many different lived experiences that shape you and you realize what you do and want to don't want to do maybe later on. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would that be?
It would be something along empowering. I like that. I like receiving that. I like putting that out there.
Yep.
I think that it resonates across all roles that I fill in my life.
Yep.
And it definitely feeds into the productivity, fostering inclusivity, my neurodivergent work. And if you're going to empower and you're going to receive empowerment, it really is a commitment between individuals and parties. So I think
Absolutely.
strongest one that comes up.
So we always like to start next. Thank you for that. We always like to start next, like a little bit more in-depth beginnings. And you already alluded to, launching your first entrepreneurial venture at age 12 with the babysitting. Did it have a name, by the way? Did it have like a brand, or was it just
It was
you?
probably something like my initials, or
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure, or it was just it was probably my name or initials. I used to do a lot of playing with acronyms, which
Yeah.
I'll
That
like
makes sense.
these
But how
patterns.
did, yeah, but how did that like that first experience? I mean, obviously you've had the entrepreneurial bug gene, whatever you want to call it, for ever since you probably were in the crib even. But how did it shape you towards where you are today with founding Keymaker Services?
So it definitely comes there. There's something, and this installation, I believe, probably came from my father. My father was an educator. He also was high cognitive ability. So that key maker, that finding that solution, problem solving, and also creating value for others, seeing what is needed around and finding a way to meet it. That that started then, absolutely, and it feeds into everything that I do now. And through that, I learned a lot of. I love the word yet. Like, oh, we
Hmm.
haven't figured that out yet. So resilience, being adaptable, understanding what people's needs are, and especially when they're not ones of my own, but putting myself in theirs. That really it it reinforced what everything played out, the next opportunity and other ways of succeeding when there isn't something already created. That informs my work. So I love when there isn't quite the best fit, and it means that we get to kind of move things around to
Hmm.
find what is the solution, or what's the possibility of a solution that we can try.
Absolutely. So interesting, it goes back to even to your dad and thinking about how yeah, I love that connection. That's awesome.
There's tons of stories there.
Oh, I'm sure there is. So sparking your interest in workforce productivity, which is something you're good at, you do. How did your background in the education influence your approach to getting into this whole field?
Hmm. Well, through education, that was a medium for me to feed that interest of how people learn and perform best, right? So great structures, a lot of exposure and discussion over that. But my background in education really helped me to look at that every person processes. It gave me the words, it gave me the science, understanding that folks process information differently, and that can actually be an asset when you know the information. So starting with those principles as awareness, and then understanding that cognitive diversity, which also ultimately that term is neurodiversity. A lot of
Hmm.
folks use neurodiversity isn't necessarily neurodivergent. It is just the understanding that there is this overarching thought that everybody's brain function, nervous system takes in information in a different, slightly different way. Mine's slightly different than yours. Yours is slightly different than whoever you're sitting next to. And that when you understand that and when you can identify that in yourself or those you're working with, you get greater efficiency and engagement and innovation. I love that you can use data to then fuel productivity and you can be more efficient in time and your true ability and those around you can come out. So that is absolutely education based.
Yeah. And how, for someone who's maybe listening as a listener and understanding, how this all fits together for you from a career perspective, and they may be thinking about how do I think, how does one kind of understand or discover their own neurodivergent path, like their path, or how do they look at that as an individual a bit more?
So whenever somebody's interested or curious in this area, I always start with doing some sort of assessment or checklist, kind of like you remember, I mean, when you go through and I think it's like the magazines when you used to take the quizzes. If yours
Yeah,
all A, do this and that. Um, but if you can go through the different areas of executive function and say, these ones impact me, and I am strong in this, I've already done development naturally or through work, through experience in these areas, really hone in and say, okay, those are going to be the ones that are going to be my main structure in my house. And those that seem like, those don't come naturally. Maybe it's attention management, maybe it's communication, maybe it is time awareness, those all feed into any job that you do. You're going to need the glue of executive functioning skills, and that those areas all speak to the nervous system and your neurodiversity. On top of that, and the very second conversation is about how is your system taking in information, and that's not just words. That's what's the temperature around you. That takes mental energy to regulate. Your body always wants to get to homeostasis, and so does your brain. What about the sounds around? And start paying attention to how different elements of your environment and the people you interact with are impacting your energy and ability to engage with, whether it's a conversation with your partner, family, friend, or is it within the work that you're doing?
interesting. Really, thank you for going deeper on that because I think it helps others kind of think through themselves about their own place in the world with some of these things. And when I think about all the great work you're doing with organizations, and especially when it comes to neurodiversity and inclusion in the workplace, why do you think it's so important for businesses today to be more, not more, but I guess in tune with this and understand it better?
Well, the very direct answer is if we're thinking from a human perspective, the population is full of folks that experience neurodiversity, whether they're at that spectrum of neurodivergent, where it's diagnosable. Maybe it's someone that has ADHD, autism, OCD, um, dysgraphia, or dyslexia, or there's some
Yeah,
anxiety, all of that. Most of the population has something that they're working through, whether they disclose it or not. And a lot of it's invisible. So it's important for companies to really include that because it impacts your bottom line. So if we're
hmm
thinking business perspective, it's money.
hmm
If you are not setting up the environment and you are not giving the tools to those that are working within your company, you're really not changing the oil on the car. You're
right.
not doing the maintenance. And so it's going to run to a certain point, and then you're going to see that there's a mismatch between the potential and the performance. So the true ability. And if your bottom line is based on the cognitive performance, if that's, and really, if we, that's every
That's
business,
everything. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We don't focus on that and we don't really give those that training, that leveling up in skill. I also think about right now how so many companies are needing to pare down. They're reducing their workforce. That means you have less folks that really need to have more skills and they really need to be able to have sustainable skills.
yeah.
So focusing that energy on the actual work versus the maladaptive maybe habits and tools and strategies that they've been using that have gotten them by, but really aren't aligned with their nervous system and their brain.
Gotcha. I want to continue on this path. I have another question, but I want to keep going on this because I'm really interested in how this all ties together. And I know you work with both businesses and young people as well.
Mhm.
Maybe to kind of humanize for our listeners a little bit more about how, how you help connect and the two areas of focus on your program support individuals and how that helps them in different stages of their development. Because I think that would be a great understanding, one for what you do and what maybe you can help others with from your vantage point, but also maybe humanizing a little bit for someone who's, hearing what you're saying and then saying, well, how do I action that in the workplace kind of thing?
Mhm. So if it's an individual or even a group of individuals and they're wanting to do this work, perhaps on their own, the first step is definitely to go through some sort of checklist or exploration to build that awareness of what areas do I already have developed and what do I not. And so there's typically 11 areas that I look at, and I look at number one is self-awareness. How much do you know about yourself, your brain, your nervous system, and do we need to explore that?
You could
Your
spend a
attention.
lot of time on that one,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
right?
And my approach is very much about you build that awareness and then we make actionable steps. And you want to start making something right away because that's part of task completion and showing up for yourself.
Right.
So attention is another area. Do you understand that there's multiple types of attention? There's sustained, there's alternating, there's divided, and you can create pathways, kind of like learning to ride a bike. It starts to become natural. How do I redirect and maintain my attention? As well as regulation. So a lot of folks don't realize that, you don't just do work on emotional and attention regulation when there's a problem. If you are proactive with it, your brain and your system will have more stamina and more ability to maintain that frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is what allows you to make decisions, to be productive, to complete tasks. But if you are not maintaining this need of our nervous system, it will shut down or it won't be functioning at its true ability.
Hmm.
So you're always clouded, right? And you're not really able to fully think and take that brain to its highest level. And that's going to impact your professional performance, your relationships, right? Being able to engage in conversation. So it's making sure you do that dive and then creating a plan of where are we going to target first that's impacting you on a daily basis. Where are we
Okay.
going to lean in and start doing some training so that you start creating those pathways that become more natural. You don't have to think so much about it. It just is
Yeah.
integrated in your daily habits. And hey, today is there I have a deadline and I know it's going to spike. I'm going to feel that stress. How do I stay clear minded so I can get this done, and what's realistic when I'm communicating to my supervisor, or if you're an entrepreneur, what's realistic to my client
Yeah.
to
It
get
kind of
done.
opens up those floodgates, if you will, to activate all that.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. So I want to flip now the conversation a little bit. It's inclusive of this, but DE and I.
Mhm.
Um, I know we've talked a little bit about it off camera, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was really just what does it mean to you personally and how it influences your approach to leadership and talent development.
Yeah. It's deeply personal, right?
Yep,
I think, and it naturally is deeply personal, probably to almost every person, right?
absolutely.
Because we're really the base of it is honoring value of people who they truly are.
Yep,
And I never have felt it to be just a corporate initiative. It's a mindset. It allows people to show up authentically and contribute in meaningful ways. And when it comes to the work that I do within companies and individually, just talent development and leadership, and how do we make you career and professional profile ready? You're creating environments. You're creating environments where diverse perspectives, which leads to innovation, right? They can be leveraged and celebrated. but it's creating that safety, and also acknowledging that equity doesn't necessarily mean the same.
Right.
There's different needs. And so if you are trying to pull within a team, within a family, within a partnership of your strengths and show up with those strengths so that they can really lend to each other, we have to create an environment of inclusion where everybody has the ability to be seen, heard, and valued for what they can contribute and supported in the ways by partnership
Right.
in those that they, are more difficult.
Absolutely. We have quite a few young listeners early in their career, mapping those, strategic milestones from high school, post-secondary, first job, and then all of this going on with DE&I and the conversations that we're flooded with right now in the media and other things. But what I wanted to ask you was thinking about somebody who's, trying to define or understand who they are and thinking about that as they're listening to you. Would you have any advice for someone who's maybe, I don't want to say struggling, but I think thinking about how to be their full self, or any advice you'd like to share?
So, my first, if you're entering into any new environment, is really take time to observe.
Mm,
Observe and take in information of what is already there when it comes to inclusion. What's the culture like? And then determine it takes me back to the disclosure trainings that I do
okay.
is and it doesn't it whatever it is that you feel like you would want to disclose or share. Basically, disclose is sharing information about self. And sometimes that's invisible and sometimes it's not. And you don't, it just is there. But understanding that whoever's receiving that, they have their own installations, their own background, their own development, and they may not have the knowledge that you do. And you want to make sure that you are sharing information or you're identifying and you're having conversations that are going to either create an environment of mutual respect and understanding, but also honors you. So it's
Mm,
deciding, I think about I was just having this conversation with a client about disclosing a disability and having a recent experience in the workplace where the disclosure was not received well.
right.
And it actually resulted in the choice of parting ways because the environment wasn't a good match. Because that client, that individual who's, young professional decided, I want to be able to be more open. And this environment is not ready for that yet.
Hmm.
So
I
when
like
you're
the
making,
yet.
yeah, when you're making decisions of what workplace you want to enter into, decide, am I going to be here to cultivate a long-term relationship? And I want to do the work to be part of creating the space that someone like myself and others can show up in,
Hmm.
completely open and sharing all aspects? Or is this something that I'm going to use as a stepping stone and really deciding how much energy you put to that? Because because
Yeah,
ultimately it doesn't, you have to decide, is it going to be me that does this work in this workplace? Or do I need to find a better fit for a workplace that wants to do the work along with me?
I
So you're
like
looking at
that.
your values. And this could be whether you're picking the university, the workplace, where you live. There has to be enough alignment between your values and opportunity for creating and developing and nurturing that home
Right.
together. And sometimes you decide that this this plot of land is not ready to be farmed, right? We got
Yeah.
to wait for their season. And that's okay.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for that insightful advice. Like, I really think that's a good perspective for people to take, because even maybe with your client, um, you know, thinking about that as an example, if that's ultimately what they discovered, then maybe that is not the place for them, because they realize, or it comes to that conclusion that overall, would you even be happy there if it was to be, oh, it's okay, let's keep going kind of thing, right? And it really wasn't.
Right. In that situation, it was going to end up being a long term, taking a lot of energy because the environment couldn't and wasn't ready to be changed enough for accommodations.
Yeah,
And that takes a lot away. So not being able to manage sound or have a space to actually produce and work, and then going home and being completely exhausted and feeling really activated throughout the day, that's not going to start your career off very well. That's going
absolutely.
to diminish what you are able to, energy you can put into developing professionally and meet your goals.
Yeah. I think about a student a couple years ago. I want to share with you, get your perspective. They actually asked if they could open their laptop while they were talking to me at a coffee chat, and I said sure. And they opened it up and were taking notes. And they said, "Look, I have to do this because I have to listen, I have to reflect, I have to read it, I have to think about it, and go back to it again, even in conversation." And I asked them if they had disclosed that to their manager, because if they're in the office and all the other student interns are, paying attention, let's say paying attention,
Right.
um, he he was an individual who was taking a lot of notes on his phone.
Yeah.
And it might be seen as, oh, he's on his phone, he's not paying attention. And I told him when it comes to performance reviews and feedback and perspectives, you may be at a disadvantage because you have not yet
Just,
told them. And my advice was I would tell them. And they actually came back and said it was a good thing I did because they had observed, like everyone observes,
yeah.
different setting or different perspectives and behaviors. And it actually worked to his advantage to tell him, his manager, that that was going on.
Yeah. Because it's a relationship agreement like any other relationship.
Right.
You're saying, hey, this is, and when I talk about disclosing, I talk about you don't need to give a label. You say, this is my experience. This is what I am doing to support myself and accommodate. And then you're asking them to partner with you so that because this is what the team and what you as an employer are going to get out of me through that. So he knew I need to take notes to manage my attention to make sure I'm fully engaged. Otherwise, you're not going to get that level. But by making that agreement of saying, hey, can we agree that I'm going to be doing this and you're okay with that? And you're going to not mislabel it as a disrespect or checking out, but really I'm actually leveling up in my respect and engagement.
Yeah.
It's all okay then.
Yeah. So we talked about individuals. Let's flip the conversation now to the leaders or the people in the business space. What can they do to create a more inclusive and productive workspace?
So really it starts in the same way. It's awareness and
Okay.
acknowledge and just really acknowledging that if you can bring into your business decisions, to your learning development, to your onboarding, to your daily tasks, that acknowledgement that there's going to be differences in cognitive processing and also how information is the medium of how information is shared.
Hmm.
When businesses understand that and they support diverse work styles, they actually benefit from more engagement. It's stronger. They're equipped with tools because they have identified that and matched that up of what is needed for their
Hmm.
workforce.
Yeah.
And that contributes to their bottom line, their goals, their lines with strengths. So it really, what they can do is start with awareness. Do something like what my company does, to a checklist, just immediately, as a general. What are your executive functioning skills needs? Where are your strengths? And then pair your teams that way. So
Mm.
these people are strong in task management. These people are really strong with client relationships or translating that in without jargon so that it's understood across the board what's going on. They need to come together because a lot of times we are put together with those that have the same strengths, and then there's nobody to fill the others. So if you base it on executive functioning skills, it's across the board. It doesn't have to be specific to any role because it is the
Right.
glue of every role.
Is the glue of every role. You're right. That is a great way to put it. Thinking about future of work, right? We're all talking, you see all these conferences, all these different discussions. And we know a lot of things are built moving towards more skills-based recruiting and opportunities that way. What skills do you think will be most essential for people's success in the years to come?
Executive function, executive function, executive function. And it
I
really,
love that because I haven't seen it listed as one of the key skills. The first one right now is AI, right? Right? Everyone goes AI for 2025.
okay, so as
Okay, so that's a skill. Okay, how do we develop it? It's beyond ChatGPT, but let's put that aside. I like yours better.
well, I mean, I'm gonna take it to some other
Yeah, that's good.
data. Okay, we know, and Harvard has. I've read this over and over again, and there's so many studies. But the Department of Development has this whole resource and of research that says executive functioning skills is the number one determiner of success above socioeconomic, above test scores, and then bring that further. That's the number one success for a leader, for a company, for a professional. So if those are not developed fully, properly through, and you are hiring a young professional, you're a young professional yourself, and you're transitioning in, and you haven't spent that time, there's going to be a point where it's like you hit this block. And
Doesn't
it's,
matter
it,
how much tech you have or how much financial backing, ground knowledge, nothing.
you, you can be a whiz in AI. And if you can't
Yeah,
manage tasks and you can't communicate and your attention is not developed, you're not going to show up at all in the way that's your true ability. So I would say executive function, but like adaptability,
yeah,
cognitive, being able to pivot and change because that's how the world of work is going, problem solving,
yeah,
emotional intelligence. I mean, all which is hilarious. I'm going through and like these are all executive functioning skills.
yeah.
So
No, it's good because some people might be like looking it up right now on their phone. What is executive functioning skills, right? But no, I get it. Every study you see and all the information out there, it's like one of the things that has been around for years of knowing this, but not necessarily talked about.
no, it's not talked about as much. I mean, we talk about the subcategories like mental flexibility is that being able to pivot. We
Yeah,
need that leaders. We need that because things change we've already seen that this year too. Things change so quickly.
yeah.
Self-awareness, time management, we know all that, but the overarching is that executive function. And if you assess that and you base your training on that and you base your education and development for yourself and your teams and your company, it's applicable to every role.
What I love
Oh,
about what you're saying too is you're building it into your day to day. I think too often it's put on like well, we'll get to that, or we'll send you to training and we'll make sure that it it can't be a stop and start. Is that right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. You got to constantly look at it.
it can't be summer camp.
That's a
It
good
has,
point.
it can't be that one. And and the thing is that so I'll give a really brief example within my own team.
Sure.
We we look at productivity and we looked at everybody has a pattern within their week, within their year, within their month of where we're highly engaged. We're able to really focus and do analytical work and produce. And then we naturally, our nervous system brains need rest. And if you start tracking that, so this is a part of task management, about attention, about your regulation. If you start tracking that through your executive functioning skills, you're going to know which days of the month, of the week to really keep sacred, where
Yeah.
to put your meetings, because meetings are naturally engaging. So when your energy and your attention starts coming down, that's when the meetings should go. And I apply that with anyone that I work with, whether it's companies or individuals. I also apply it within my own team, where we notice I actually know the dates of the team members that I've tracked over a year where I go, this is where you get sick, you're tired, you're not able to produce over and over again. Here's the pattern. These are the days that you're off.
Wow.
That's we're just
Yeah.
gonna follow. That's your brain. I'm not we're not gonna force it. We're gonna go with the grain.
Yeah. Why wouldn't we? Right.
It's smart and it's business smarts too, because I'm not forcing and putting money into and investing into time that really is should be honored for rest because we're going to get more together out. And then also you can set up relays. So like this person has this and they're coming down. Now that this other person that is coming up, they're going to, here you go. Now you take it and keep going. Now we're actually using the whole day, the whole month.
Really, really impactful insights and results someone can do by looking at that. And I also encourage any of our guests or I'm sorry, any of our guests, any of our listeners or anyone, hearing you today to reach out to you and engage because I know the information you're sharing here is, really something that can take people from, one level to the next and also organizations. So, man, I could just go on and on talking to you all day. I just love, yeah, love our conversations, but I know we have to bring this to a close. I do want to thank you so much for being on the podcast and joining me today. It's been a pleasure as always, and thank you so much for sharing and unlocking human potential for us in a new way.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I love these conversations.
Thank you so much. For our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your network. You can find us at coffeewithconvery.com or on your favorite platform. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram for updates and more inspiring content. This is Coffee with Convery, where we show you success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym. Thanks and have a great day.